Ingram. This is the Ingram Angle on a breaking news night. Tonight, America is seeing the ultimate in election interference as 4 unelected state judges, all appointed by Democrat governors, have ruled that Donald Trump must be kept off next year's presidential ballot. The Colorado Supreme Court, in a 4-3 decision, wrote that we conclude that because President Trump is disqualified from holding the office of president under Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, it would be a wrongful act under the election code for the secretary to list Trump as a candidate on the presidential primary ballot. Therefore, the secretary may not list President Trump's name on the 2024 presidential primary ballot, nor may she count any write-in votes cast for him. Now, the suit focused on that Section 3 of the 14th Amendment that was aimed at barring Confederates from federal office who engaged in insurrectionist behavior or rebellion. Now, remember, the case was spearheaded by a left-wing group called Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington. That's great. Now, the Trump legal team will need to move fast and appeal this to the Supreme Court of the United States. The decision of the Colorado Supreme Court is stayed or delayed until January 4th, which is a key deadline in being able to qualify for the ballot. Here to react, Jonathan Turley, Fox News contributor and law professor at GW University. Jonathan, to think that 4 unelected state court judges could conceivably end up determining the presidential election is something I think most Americans are just shaking their head tonight, saying this can't be the United States.
No, it is a strikingly anti-democratic holding, in my view. The court literally faced a series of interpretive barriers to get to where it ended up. It adopted the most sweeping, broadest possible interpretation to get over every one of those hurdles. So throughout this opinion, it had to adopt interpretations that could encompass a wide array of statements. You know, they used what's called true threat precedent to show that you can view what Trump said as encouraging an insurrection by looking at stuff that he said at other times. And that, of course, allowed them to reach this conclusion. In my view, the court is dead wrong. This is the first major win for these challengers. They've gone to a number of blue states. This is one of the bluest state Supreme Courts you can get to. Even with that, it's split. I think the opinion is really chilling, and I think that the Supreme Court will make fast work of this theory. I hope it does. But I think this court, did great damage to its own integrity with this opinion.
And there have been other rulings in other state Supreme Courts, correct? Or federal courts that have come to the opposite conclusion here. So this is an outlier, which, again, because of what's at stake, it's going to have to be expedited to the Supreme Court.
Yeah, when you read this opinion, the one thing that keeps on recurring in your mind is, where's the limiting principle here? What would not satisfy this test? At each one of these barriers, the court could have adopted a fairly moderate or more narrow approach, but it didn't. And so on every one of these issues, it really took out all the fail-safes and went to the broadest possible meaning. Well, that means that states could engage in a tit-for-tat type of series of decisions. You know, you could have red states blocking Biden on some ballots and blue states blocking Trump. And the way this is viewed by the public is really quite horrific. You know, they view President Biden on the ropes, and the ref just called the match.
Well, just so everyone understands this tonight, essentially, the state Supreme Court of Colorado concluded that the former president is guilty of a federal crime that he's ever been charged with, which is insurrection or rebellion, for which he could have been impeached as president, but he has not been charged with that. That's never been adjudicated. So with that, could Republicans, to your point, say, well, by undermining U.S. sovereignty, by leaving the border open, President Biden is trying to undermine the U.S. Constitution. It's tantamount to an insurrection. It's a broad view, but he's going to have to be taken off the ballot of, name your red state.
Well, this court just handed partisans on both sides the ultimate tool to try to shortcut elections. And it's very, very dangerous. I mean, this country is a powder keg, and this court is just throwing matches at it. And I think that it's a real mistake, but I think that they're wrong on the law. January 6th was many things, most of it not good. In my view, it was not an insurrection. It was a riot. That doesn't mean that the people responsible for that day shouldn't be held accountable. But to call this an insurrection for the purpose of disqualification would create a slippery slope for every state in the union. This is a time when we actually need democracy. We need to allow the voters to vote. We need to hear their decision. And the court here just said, you're not going to get that. In Colorado, we're not going to let you vote for Donald Trump.
No.
And, you could dislike Trump. You could believe he's responsible for January 6th, but this isn't the way to do it. I mean, it is, for people that say they're trying to protect democracy, this is hands down the most anti-democratic opinion I've seen in my lifetime.
And it's worth noting that 3 of the judges in dissent were also Democrat appointees. The whole court's appointed by Democrat governors. So it was right down the middle, 4-3 decision. Again, the country hangs in the balance. The court's going to have to decide this. Jonathan, thank you. Joining me now for the political angle here is Ned Ryan, founder and CEO of American Majority. Ned, I know you have a lot to say tonight. The Trump team just issued a statement saying in part that Democrat Party leaders have lost faith in the failed Biden presidency, are doing everything they can to stop the American voters from throwing them out of office next November. We'll swiftly file an appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court and a concurrent request for a stay of this deeply undemocratic decision. Ned, you and I have spoken a lot about this concept of lawfare, meaning using the judicial system to stop the people from getting what they want and what they support. This is it not, playing out tonight?
100%, Laura. I mean, this is, as Jonathan Turley just said, really breaking democracy to save democracy, according to the left. They don't want the voters to decide this. I think there's obviously this deep fear of Donald Trump potentially winning the White House back and what he would do when he's back in office in regards to breaking apart the administrative state and the status quo. I have to tell you, though, Laura, looking at this, I think it's a pretty toothless ruling. If I'm being honest, looking at the clause where they said, if there's a stay before January 4th, that stay will be in place. And if there's a appeal to the Supreme Court, I really think the provisional ruling is left in the hands of the Supreme Court, which is the correct ruling. I think the Supreme Court is going to make quick work of this. But again, this is the left trying to decide that they are not going to let Donald Trump be in front of the voters next year. Because I think it is a deeply seated fear of Donald Trump. He's an existential threat to their plans for the future.
Well, but what everyone has to understand is this is just the opening salvo of what is to come in the next 11 months. I mean, this is just like one thing, like a little pebble in the pond. So they're going full bore at him. They do not want the American people to have a vote. They are not interested in that democracy, as they claim that they're trying to protect democracy. That's the truth tonight. We're seeing it play out with the border, the outrage we're going to get into in a few minutes, and the border, Ned, swamping this country with indigents, and now this. And then it's going to be Jack Smith, and then it's going to be Fannie Willis, and then it goes on and on.
They're not going to go quietly into that good night, Laura. They're not going to throw up their hands and go, oh, you know what, Donald Trump's going to be on the ballot. Donald Trump will win. We tried our best. We're just going to stop now. No, if we're in December of 2023, it will only continue to accelerate as their fear increases that Donald Trump will win the primary. He will be the GOP nominee. He's polling extremely well against Joe Biden in the key presidential battleground states. They're not going to throw up their hands and just walk away from this. So you will see an increase in the lawfare and the attempts to bring Donald Trump down and really refuse to let the American voters decide. And that's the correct outcome, Laura. If we really were going to have free and fair elections, they would stop this. They'd stop it immediately. and allow the American voters to truly decide, was Donald Trump guilty of insurrection? Was he guilty of anything that the left has claimed? If so, obviously on the ballot, they can choose to accept or reject him, but they don't even want the American people to have that decision, be able to make that vote.
Yeah, the great defenders of democracy don't want the people to have their say. They don't want new immigrants who can vote for the first time. They don't want suburban women. They don't want any of these people to vote. They want to decide with unelected judges in one state.
Correct.
Now, this tells you how they're fanatic. Ned, we got to go to the next guest, but you nailed the political angle. Thank you so much. Joining me now is that guest, Chris Landau, former law clerk for Justices Clarence Thomas and Antonin Scalia. He's also the former ambassador to Mexico under President Trump. Chris, I know, given your extensive experience at the court, also as a advocate at the court, what do you expect the court to do here, and your reaction to this, the first time ever, Section 3 of Article 3 of the 14th Amendment, Section 3 has been used to bar a president from the ballot?
Laura, I hope everybody's irony meters are just going off the charts tonight, because this is one of the most anti-democratic decisions we have seen in American history, that 4 unelected judges on a state Supreme Court have taken it upon themselves to disqualify someone who otherwise meets all the qualifications that the Constitution imposes from the ballot for President of the United States of America. I think the U.S. Supreme Court will take one look at this and say, well, this cannot stand. So in a sense, that's, I think, the silver lining here, that it won't stand. But it is terrifying to me as an American that this kind of lawfare is being waged, that courts are so presumptuous that they think that it's up to them to decide who can be on the ballot to let democracy work. They're free to dislike Donald Trump, especially people who don't like Donald Trump should be terrified at this decision, because the worst thing, frankly, for them is to say the courts took him off the ballot. I mean, we should be able, as American citizens, to have an adult conversation on this and vote. Why are these people so terrified that they're bending all the rules to get Trump off the ballot? Let the people vote.
Now, Chris, President Trump is going to address this, we believe, in moments in Iowa. But first, we have reaction on MSNBC from the Colorado Secretary of State. Watch.
Trump's actions are unprecedented. The Colorado Supreme Court confirmed that the district court got it right, that he did engage in insurrection. But how the Supreme Court differed from the district court is that they said that Section 3 of the 14th Amendment does indeed apply to the presidency. And honestly, I think Section 3 of the 14th Amendment has to apply to the presidency, because if not, it's a get out of jail free card. And
Chris, the fact that this woman, as the secretary of anything, I wouldn't have her be a secretary in a local county clerk's office, let alone of the state of Colorado, is terrifying.
It's terrifying because these are the people. So what a Secretary of State does is administer elections. So this is the person, folks in Colorado, who is administering your election. You think this person is a fair person to administer your election? God bless you if you think that's the way it is. Laura, I think one thing to really emphasize.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, one thing to emphasize is that these seeds were planted by the Democrats on January 6th itself. It was no accident from the very beginning that they insisted on calling this an insurrection, right? I mean, again, what happened on January 6th was extremely bad news, right? But to say it's an insurrection, to say it's like the equivalent of the U.S. Civil War, which is what this was, what led to this clause in the Constitution, is ludicrous. Okay, but I think they were very clever that they wanted to use that word. And I don't know if you noticed that people were insisting from the very beginning, it was very important for them that it be called an insurrection. How convenient. That's exactly the word the Constitution uses. So this was all being set up really for the past, 2.5 years. But again, I think as a lawyer, this seems to me to be an incredibly feeble argument. And again, if people don't like Trump, if people think that this January 6th was disqualifying, fine, let people vote on that. That's why we have elections.
But But Chris, I think this is a good time to tell our viewers that what they saw in this decision, what they're seeing in this decision, is judicial activism. They take the Constitution and turn it into a piece of silly putty for political ends. That is classic judicial activism, is it not?
It is, yes, Laura, and it is good to have the mask ripped off. You can see the fangs here, folks. These people, they don't care a whit about democracy or your right to vote for who you think is the best president. This is a raw act of judicial power by 4 unelected judges in the state of Colorado. Okay, it's on a question of federal law, thank goodness, so they don't have the final word on questions of federal law. That goes to the U.S. Supreme Court. And I am confident that the U.S. Supreme Court will reverse this because it is a lawless ruling. Politically, it may wind up benefiting Trump. Who knows? But it is not good for our country at all, Laura.
No. And
Except
I hope
as a
the
civics
voters
lesson.
of Colorado are watching this very carefully tonight, because you have 4 judges on your Supreme Court who don't believe you have a right to cast your ballot for whom you want, unless you support Biden. That's it, or the other candidates. But if you like Trump and you're in Colorado or you're on the fence, guess what? They don't think you count. Chris, thank you for your analysis. So important tonight. We really, really appreciate it.